Squint. It'll help. Put your fucking glasses on. Know what you're doing. Bring Gary into that room with you.
I'm trying
Have
to
him
get
sit
this
there.
thing. Good evening, everybody. This is Divided We Stand. It's the 1st of June. It feels like April out there. It's kind of cool. We'll take it, right? Yes, it's the 1st of June, Sunday night. And this is Divided We Stand. If you are unfamiliar with this is Divided We Stand on YouTube. You can also find us on Facebook. We have a group page. Very, very popular. We ask that you become a member of our group page. It is a private page, but we'll accept you as long as you're not an obnoxious Trumper, so to speak. And we also ask that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Dave and I would be really, really happy if you did that. We are not monetized. We're not looking for money, so you're at the right place. In any case, I'd like to introduce my co-host and good friend, journalist, ex-educator, writer, musician, kind of a lot of things he is. But he's with us tonight, and that is Dave Price. Dave, how the hell are you doing?
Well, I would be better if I could see myself. I cannot see myself. Once again, for the second week in a row, you have proven to be completely technologically inept.
Hey, look, this whole program was shot down after my computer went down, and I have no idea why it's doing whatever it's doing, but
Well,
if you
we'll
look,
try
if
again.
you use your phone, put the volume down.
No. Here's the thing. That's a step I shouldn't have to take. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. I'm beginning to really believe that you are to webcasting what Donald Trump is to the presidency of the United States. That's good. Put on a hat. That helps.
Okay.
All right, here we
All
go.
right, so we have a show tonight, Dave, and a lot has happened.
We do.
this week. Nothing out of the ordinary in terms of the Trump administration, but a lot of things have happened.
Can I stop you there just for a minute?
Sure.
And I agree with what you just said. Nothing out of the ordinary with the Trump administration. Did I quote you correctly? Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely 100% right. And what's so scary about that is absolutely abnormal, subnormal, whatever word you want to use, is the way that Trump operates the White House. I think sometimes we actually lose sight of that, like nothing he does, nothing, not one damn thing. I bet you he even sits down to pee. Nothing that man does is normal. Can you think of anything that stands out as normal? I cannot. I'm not talking about just this week.
No, I agree with you. I don't see anything normal about the man. Nothing that he does. He doesn't seem to sleep. He eats shit. He talks shit. He sutures his one side of his scalp to the other. I have no idea where this guy's coming from. He is just completely mental.
Okay. And we agree on that. And I think many people who agree with us agree with that, okay?
Right.
Or who are on our side. But then it gets even a little bit more frightening, if you will.
Right.
Trump is president. He didn't take over the presidency with a power play. There is some question which our sometimes co-host, sometimes guest from Kentucky, Ryan Velez, is looking into, along with others. There seems to be a possibility, and again, notice I'm saying possibility, not even probability, that maybe there was some interference, and that, of course, that would point the finger at Elon Musk. And Trump himself, in a couple comments, have indicated something like this. Well, Musk is a genius with computers, and in Pennsylvania, and we won Pennsylvania, as if there's a connection. But of course, with Trump's dislogic or whatever the hell it is, we don't even know what he's saying. But I go back and forth. I don't know if you do this, Brian. I say, who is the biggest danger? Is it Trump? Is it Trump's cabinet? Because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to kill us. I mean, I'd love to tell you some other reason or something else he's doing. He's not. And the list goes on and on. Is it the GOP who are keeping Trump in power? They could tomorrow. The House could bring impeachment charges against him. The Senate could impeach him, and he would be gone. They choose not to do that. They're not going to do that, which means there's no legislative relief in sight that we can see until the midterms, which is 2 years away. And look at the damage Trump has done in 4 months, not even 5 months yet. And imagine with 19 more months to go or something like that, what he can do. Or is it something with the American people who will vote for Trump? What do you think, Brian? If you had to list those things, Trump, the cabinet, the legislator, and let's add one more. We'll also throw the Supreme Court in there, who gave a ruling basically saying that Trump can do whatever he wants as president, carte blanche, or the people that voted him in. What do you think is the biggest danger?
Okay. I would say right now, the Supreme Court is the biggest problem because they're the ones who could put an end to it all. The people, yeah, they can vote him in and out and this and that. But while he's here, I think the Supreme Court is it. And as you said, they've basically given him carte blanche to do what he fucking wants.
Now, what we're going to see, and I agree with that assessment, Brian. But what we're going to see is how much shit, verbal shit, will the Supreme Court take, and specifically its leader, John Roberts, from Donald Trump. See, Trump is transactional. We know that. But he's transactional to the second. I've never encountered anyone like that. In other words, you could give him $1 million, and he would gladly take it. And if 13 seconds later, you said, "How's it going, Taco?" which we'll talk a little bit later in the show, all of a sudden you're his enemy. I mean, there's no loyalty, there's no basis. It's what have you done for me in the last 10 seconds is the way he approaches life. So he's been somewhat critical. And of course, MAGA, swayed by his feelings, beliefs, dreams, nightmares, whatever the hell he's talking about, follow suit. And they've been very critical of John Roberts, who I've maintained all along has to have some semblance of sanity because it will be known as the Roberts Court. Now, I have no idea.
Yeah, his name is on it, basically.
Yeah, but that doesn't help me explain why. I think we could do a show on that, right? The top 10 bad Supreme Court decisions. But I think one of them would be the one for Trump, and it would be up there pretty high. But then you've got Amy Coney Barrett, and there's a lot of talk here in D.C. that first of all, she's not the bimbette that people kind of ascribe to her. There are people who say she has a pretty good legal mind. Secondly, she had a cause, and she was named for a cause, and that cause was she wanted to see the repeal of Roe v. Wade, and that's happened. Now, if you look at some of her other votes, when you see a 5-4 ruling, basically what you're saying is this. I will say it today. I would say it to their face. Supreme Court Justice Thomas and Supreme Court Justice Alito should be in prison for malfeasance. There's no question about that. They have no business being on the court. I can't say Alito never did. I can say Clarence Thomas never did. You've got Judge Kavanaugh, who is kind of not an enigma, but he's kind of the good old frat boy, right? That's what he strikes me as. The good old frat boy who kind of came his way up, drinking his way up, partying a little bit. Again, we know he had some allegations that were dismissed by Republican legislators, but he's in there. Then you've got Gorsuch, who people kind of say has a pretty decent legal mind, but is extremely conservative and has an axe to grind against bureaucracy and against underlings in government because his mother was part of, I think, the Reagan administration, and he feels that she got the shaft, et cetera, et cetera. That leaves Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett as the two Republicans, both conservative, who apparently will side. So, is that going to be a 5-4? Mm-hmm. We've seen a couple 7-2s. We've seen a few 6-3s, and of course 6-3 is the ideological breakdown of the court. You have three liberals, all of whom happen to be of varying degrees of responsibility and varying degrees of ability, both abilities. So, the question becomes: will the Supreme? I think the Supreme Court hedges on two people. One is Roberts, and the other is Amy Coney Barrett. And both have been, as I pointed out, both of them have been attacked at length by MAGA. And I would think, Brian, I don't know how you would feel, but if I were a Supreme Court justice, I obviously have gone to school quite a bit, right? Got my legal degree, should have some standing, should probably feel pretty good about myself. I don't know how Thomas and Alito could, but they do. And to hear people who basically have a fourth grade education, attack, I would think that would become a cause where I might say, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. So we'll see. We'll see. The other thing we didn't discuss, and we just briefly will and get it out of the way, is the other factor that's in play here is the military. And we don't know. We do know two facts about the military currently. They have agreed to Trump's proposal to have what appears to be a $45 million authoritarian parade on June 14th, which is his birthday. Okay, that we know. But we also know that they have issued at least 3 statements and maybe more saying this in no way is celebrating the president's birthday. This is celebrating our 250th birthday of the birth of the Army. Now, to support that, we're going to see, they say, or those of us who see or go or watch or whatever, we're going to see, well, I guess you call them reenactors. I mean, but they'll actually be military reenactors from all the major conflicts of America, from the Revolution all the way through. So that's the only thing we know. So are they pro-Trump? Are they anti-Trump? Does it matter who the generals back? Does it matter at all who Drunken Pete, decides to go with? Does he have any sway over them at all? Does Trump? So, it's all still to be found out. But we did find out some more things this week. Okay. And the first one I'd like to talk about, and of course get some of your reaction to, is what I'm calling maybe the biggest loss that doesn't involve a loss of life directly in American democracy, is what I'm calling the death of empathy. And specifically, I am charging Donald Trump with providing the impetus to kill empathy in America. Why do I say that? He has none. He has absolutely none. I'm sure you've seen the meme, where he mocks that reporter, right? The handicapped reporter. And a lot of people say that should have been the end of it. Well, it should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. And he goes on and he continues to do that. And he even did it this week. Okay. But more than that, I think, to me, the president of the United States, doesn't have the power that a lot of people ascribe to him or someday, hopefully, her. They have a lot of power. But what they really do, Bri, is set the tone for the country. That's what they really do. And in terms of empathy, Trump has basically said, And he got some support with that, with his buddy. I'm going to start calling him Leon. I like Leon better than Elon. So Leon Musk comes along. And his quote was, if I remember correctly, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. Wow. No, Elon Leon. The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is we allowed asshole oligarchs like you who've provided nothing. He hasn't invented anything. He hasn't done anything. He simply capitalizes on ideas and off he goes, right?
Right.
So no, you're wrong about that. Now, you are right about you have no empathy. That part is true. So now back to how is Trump setting this tone? I rarely refer to this, but I have to tonight. I do not believe a man should call a woman a cunt. I do not believe that. But tonight I'm going to call a woman a cunt. A disgustingly smelly cunt. I don't even know if she is a smelly cunt. I'm sure she takes a bath, so she's a smelly. And that would be the senator from Iowa, Joni Ernst. Now, what do you know about Joni Ernst that we discovered, what was it, May 30th? So what's that, 2 days ago? Do you know what happened?
Yes, indeed.
Well, what happened, Brian?
Well, she was questioned, and she couldn't handle it, and she just gave a generic answer. All people die. Everybody dies. It was a callous statement, and now she's trying to make up for it. She knows she made the mistake.
Well, I'm gonna agree with everything you said except for the last part. If she is, then I could add dumb cunt to it. I'm calling her a cunt because, again, she shows her lack of empathy. All right. Basically, as you said, Brian, we'll set the stage. Somebody hollered out. They were talking about the cuts coming in Medicare and Medicaid and all these cuts. And somebody in the audience said, and somebody's going to die. And then, as you pointed out,
Right.
People are
Her
going to
constituents
die.
would have been dying too.
It wasn't like this was, this was her.
Right. It was a
people.
legitimate question.
It was, of course, it's a legitimate question. And she responded, as you said. Well, she did make an apology. No, she made a video. Now, listen to this. This was her apology. First of all, she filmed it in a graveyard. Okay. And she said a couple things, but she said kind of with a laugh, basically that, excuse me. She said, quote, she was glad she didn't have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. Let me repeat that. She was glad she didn't have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. Okay. I think historically, we could equate that to a famous saying by a woman, French woman, Marie Antoinette, who basically said, let them eat cake. Okay. Or at least that's what she's attributed to. And that's basically Joni Ernst's version.
You're absolutely right. That's exactly.
Of let me eat. And let's point out what happened to Marie Antoinette. Do you remember what happened to Marie Antoinette? She lost her head.
Right.
And I'm telling you, if this continues and it gets worse or stays this bad, now I don't know that people will literally lose their head, but I would hope if an anti-Trump faction, whatever that faction is, of course we're talking about liberals and Democrats the way it works now, but I don't care. I would hope that these people, Elon Musk, Joni Ernst, are put on trial much as, I got back from Eastern Europe, much as the followers of Adolf Hitler were put on trial. It's not Trump solely alone. I mean, we're looking at, we're talking about that earlier. Trump does not do what Trump does if the legislature would stop him. Trump does not do what he does if the Supreme Court would stop him.
Right.
Trump does not do what he does if the military would stop him. So, I mean, there are ways, and with the exception of military, that's a little scary area. But I think, I would charge the Supreme Court with negligence if they continue on the path that they're on, or at least the judges who are continuing to do that. And of course, I would charge each and every GOP senator and GOP. But now when I say that, I got to back it up. I'm going to save it for Ryan. But they're talking now about the bluegrass resistance, which is pretty cool. And it's two senators and a congressman from Kentucky. So we'll go into that next time when Ryan's here. But so it's not you can't say it's every GOP politician, but it's a hell of a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And so just in case we missed the point, did you see what Trump said about Joe Biden? He did a couple things this week. As we know, Joe Biden has a not favorable prognosis of cancer. And I want to get this right, so I'm going to actually refer to notes here, if I may, for just a moment. Trump says, excuse me, Trump said at a press conference in which he said goodbye to his good friend Elon Musk, said the following, talking about Mr. Biden and his cancer diagnosis. And I quote, "If you feel sorry for him, don't feel sorry, because he is so vicious. What he did with his political and all the people, with his political," and he stops there, it makes no sense. We're just talking about himself, "and all the people he hurt. He hurt a lot of people, Biden." Now, first of all, I mean, grammatically, it's just ridiculous. But basically what he's saying is, don't feel sorry for him. He was a bad guy. By direction, then, I'm not. I'm telling you he was a bad guy. And here was his final. "So I really don't feel sorry for him." I believe that is Trump's true feelings. Do we give him bonus points?
He doesn't think about him at all, aside from the fact that he sees him as a threat, but that's about it.
Yeah, no. So any human being, even Trump, if I were to learn tomorrow that he had a fatal disease, I would feel a moment of sympathy and empathy for him, and then I would pray that that'd be the fastest disease ever to take a human being off the face of the earth. Okay, but you still, I mean, I would do that with some reluctance. With Trump, there is no reluctance. But the bully doesn't like to be made fun of. So probably the majority of this week, and that speaks a lot to the American public and to social media and all that, was around tacos. Now, we're not talking about the tacos I get at Los Tias Mexican Salvadorian restaurant down the street here. We're talking about a new taco. So, Brian, what do you know about that, this new taco thing?
Well, he was confronted about his lack of ability to keep the tariffs where they were against the Chinese, because he knows what's going to happen. They called his bluff. And so Trump always chickens out. And he didn't, a bully doesn't want to be seen as weak. And that's exactly what he was seen as. And it's a perfect way to describe him. And I think that's going to be one of the best things for him. Just let's go taco.
And let's go, Brandon. It's playing off of that. Mm-hmm. Taco. Think about this. It has the ramifications of he's anti-immigrant, migrant, Mexican. I mean, it is perfect. Now, Trump always chickens out. My understanding is it actually came from Wall Street, where Wall Street dealers were saying, we'll ride this one out because he always chickens out.
Right.
And I did not realize this. I know he changed it a lot, but somebody kind of counted them, and he's actually changed his position on tariffs more than 50 times in 4 months. Now, that doesn't mean 50 different tariffs, right? I mean, it's this, that, no, this, that, over here, there, that. And certainly, just being okay. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind, but not at that level, not without thinking it out. He again is called. Maybe he really does believe in Make America Great in, what was it, 1898. The country was in a miserable place and we went into depression, but that's kind of what he's actually said. That's America's best time. But here's something that really worries me, Brian. I want to know you're far more astute in economics than I am. I was reading a little bit and they said, what if his tariff movement is a plan? And here's the plan. He invokes the tariff, the stock market tanks, people can buy stocks at a really low price. He then removes the tariff and they bounce back and you're walking away with more money than you had before. Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, do you think that could be a possibility?
Well, here's the problem I have with it all along. When he has that type of behavior where he first says I'm going to have a tariff, and then he walks it back because the Chinese called his bluff, and he knows what will happen to the economy because the big boys behind him who actually do know economics will say, Don, it'll go down the toilet if you do this. I think the damage is already done because I think what's happened now, he's changed. Again, it's a paradigm shift. It's a change in the way people are buying stocks because we always had day traders, working at the computers and saying, okay, we're gonna by 11 o'clock we're gonna cash this in and make some money, and that's not the way the stock market's set up to work. But that's what's happening right now because it's very, very short term. Even if it's not during the day, it's within a day. And when you have that type of stock market, I think it's going to, first of all, it's going to ruin people like you and me who were teachers, part of unions, where our money is basically locked in. We're kind of like a floor for the stock market because they have the hedge fund managers that handle all these unions, and we have to leave the money in. It's not like I could just call up Dow Jones and say let's take the money out. Right. No, there's a certain protection that we don't have, but they're using us. They're using the average worker, and then when you have this type of system, it's this up and downness. They'll be the ones to make the money in the stock market because they'll be able to predict when it happens. And we are just going to go back and forth and back. We're going to vacillate. And it's nothing but bad news. And I think anybody who's trying to get into the stock market, if you have the mentality of buy and hold, which is one of the basic strategies in buying stocks, which I understand. I just never got involved in it because I wasn't a guy with money. But that's the way it's done. I think that is going to be the change. And Dave, to be frank with you, when I do look at the Dow Jones from time to time, because I try to make the connection between the news event and where this thing is going. And after the initial crashing of the market, a month ago or whatever, when things started really going down, when he said he would have the tariffs and there was no deal, and even now, even though he's pushed this into the future. Sooner or later, there's going to be a time where he's going to give in again, and I think that they know he's going to give in. But it's interesting how even with bad news, this stock market holds on, and I don't know who's doing what. I think most people like you and me, we would probably just get the hell out at some point, especially as you get older. You say, you know what, I'm just going to put my money into treasuries or whatever the hell it is, bonds. So it's going to have a different type of investor. And I see nothing good with this. And in fact, again, he can keep playing this game where he says, okay, I'm going to have tariffs on this. We're going to have manufacturing come back to the United States. And then the Chinese call his bluff. The Europeans call the bluff. The Canadians call his bluff instead of the Mexicans. Right. So and then he walks it back, and then he declares victory. It's the same thing with negotiating with Iran. Like, he talked all this tough shit about Iran, like we're going to do this, and he keeps talking about the shit, but he knows he can't do this because the Middle East, he is in cahoots, especially with Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia isn't really close with Iran. But the point is that he's not going to be accomplished what he thinks he's going to accomplish. And he plays this game by saying, well, this was part of negotiating tactics. I put it high, and then if we get it to 20% or 30%, we're going to do fine. Basically, he's like a kid that says, well, I did it on purpose. That's why I said that, when you realize that it was bullshit. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it, and I don't know why the stock market's holding on. Maybe it's just, again, maybe it's a paradigm shift, or maybe he's telling certain people with money, like the Buffetts of the world, and then they put in, $3 billion into certain stocks, and then it's enough to hold up the market. But the rest of us don't know that information. And even if we did, everybody can't make any money, because remember, the last guy out's the guy that's going to get killed.
Right.
Somebody's going to lose.
I think you all of what you said was good, but I think the one area that Americans should worry about, most of us, I would say the majority of Americans, are not, do not invest in the stock market themselves at a high level, not like the 1%, okay, or even the 10%, even if you went to 15%, richest. But we do have money in there, in our pensions.
And I'm going to interrupt you, Dave, because I think this is important. Is that when you're talking about the stock market, you have what's called the primary market, and you have the secondary market. So when there's an IPO, when you put in money to that company, that first time is the only time that's actually going to the company. You say, okay, I want this to survive. I like solar power, so I'm going to invest in solar stocks. That money does go to those companies. But when you get to the secondary market, which most of the trading is in the secondary markets, then it's just people trying to make money off of each other. And again, it's a shell game, and you eventually get to the point where the last guy out gets killed. Except Trump and his cronies, they have the advantage because they know and they can dictate the events. And so they make these killings, and this is how he's becoming rich. And this is typical of Trump. He has always made his money on doing illegal things and playing out the legal system.
I remember when we started this show, and a number of years ago now, and you were saying, you had the position that he was like the Teflon Don. Nothing ever stuck to him. And I'm going, oh, well, wait and see. I was wrong, Brian. I was wrong. You were right. I was wrong. No problem with that. Well, there's a problem for us Americans, but I'm just saying I don't have a problem.
It's not something I wanted to be right about either, right?
No, but you were 100% right, it appears, because now, again, coming back to that Supreme Court decision, that basically says whatever you want. Really is what it says. I mean, you can do anything, but the one thing I don't think you could overturn is that's where it becomes supposedly the idea of checks and balances, right? And what we're finding is those checks and balances aren't working right now.
Right, because it's only like the lower courts that are kind of helping us out. And then he appeals, and then 3 days later, there's a Trump court that just knocks it down. And if he has to go to the Supreme Court, he will. And then they come through on the major issues.
And coming back to my theme for tonight, empathy. I don't know how anyone can go to bed tonight, anyone in America, and if they think about it, not be troubled about the fact that we know we have more than one innocent person jailed in a foreign country who is innocent. We may have many, many more of those. The idea of habeas corpus, which the Attorney General does not know what it means, which is another frightening thing.
And nor does she care to know what it means.
No, because it'll be manipulated. That stands in their way. So, again, empathy. How can the when who pose, my opponent, feel that that's okay? I mean, because look, you don't have to be a great thinker to understand this. If they can do it to one, they can do it to all. Correct?
Correct.
There's no other answer that fits.
And don't forget that 50% of America will agree with your ass getting shipped away and me getting my ass shipped away.
And that's part of it too. And so, but I mean, I just don't get how you can't, is it, okay, let's try it this way. Maybe we're not the two to be talking about this. Maybe we can get I can't see if questions come on, but you can. I really don't get Do you fear? Okay, let's do it this way. Do you fear Mexican migrants?
No, I mean, in general, I mean, I believe in laws for immigration per se,
Right.
but I don't think any Democrat, decent Democrat, is any different than I am. But we've got this thing confused that we're the ones that are just letting people come in, and most
Which,
of the people
no.
are law abiding.
Now, I would agree, and you and I probably would have maybe a better feel for it than some, because Bridgeton now, last I saw, it is now 81% Hispanic Latino, I believe.
I wouldn't
That's
doubt
the
it.
city.
Right.
Yeah, and you see it in the school system. The school system, last number I saw was it was 70 when I left 15 years ago. It was 78% in preschool. Now,
And that's where they saw it changing at the
right,
preschool.
and now my understanding is, looking at a couple stats, Bridgeton School District and indeed the high school is a little bit under, but the school district is now 78%, which would stand to reason, right?
Right.
And your high school might be 70, whatever, I don't know. So you're around them, you're teaching them. I hate to use the word them, but I'm going to use it just now, not pejoratively, but just to separate this idea. And I never once felt any fear from any Hispanic, Mexican, back then. Now I guess there are more, like, I understand you got some Hondurans and other people coming through, but I never was. I mean, any more than they fought, but that's what happened. But downtown, all of this, and quite honestly, this is my personal opinion. I know there's 1/3 of the country that won't agree with me, but I'm fine with that. I fear Donald Trump MAGA supporters more than I fear any immigrant anywhere.
Right, and I mean that's look at these people from Idaho and these it used to be like the John Birchers, but they
Right.
didn't have to really worry about them. But now when you have the Proud Boys and these other organizations, and I don't want to call them organizations, they're just like Posse Comitatus or what. They're outlaws, and they
Right.
will come after people like you and me because they see us as the great Satan in a certain sense. I mean, because we're the ones that are the greatest threat to them. Maybe not even the Hispanics, just the people who are liberals. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're splitting hairs here. It doesn't even matter. But they're violent.
No, well,
they're
they
cowards
are.
too.
Well, that's just it. I mean, okay, let's set up an unreal situation that I hope never happens, but let's do it. Let's assume that the white nationalists suddenly do take up arms and they're fighting. There's a lot of gangsters in the inner cities too, right? And do they fight? I don't foresee that, but I mean, right now, with Trump in office, nothing is off limits. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing he does or nothing that happens from something that he did. I do think that, again, we could have been more diligent at the border if the numbers aren't astronomical. Like Trump has said, 21 million killers we let in.
Right. It's just absurd.
That's totally ridiculous. But I again, some things become so routine that they don't make the news. Okay, or they don't make it in this area, or in the area. And we do know that ICE is staging raids all over. Now, a couple interesting things about that, Brian. Kid Rock, right? The Bruce Springsteen of MAGA. He closed his restaurant when he heard they were coming. He has a restaurant in Vegas. I actually went by and spit on it at one point. But he closed it, because he thought that was coming and wouldn't do it. So we know that we know he was employing illegal there to work. So, he's big talk about it. It's terrible. Well, you're doing it just like Trump. So you've got the hypocrisy, which is also up there. I don't ever remember it. America has never been open necessarily, but it's never been this hypocritical at that. In fact, I believe, I couldn't find it, but I read back to Joni Ernst just for a moment, that she actually said in one of her remarks, not the video, but another one, she said, look, just put your trust in Jesus. Okay, that's fine, unless Jesus isn't the Son of God. Okay? And I will say this to Joni Ernst. If you think the way you act reflects the way a Christian should act, again, I'm going to use the C word, you are a mistaken cunt. Okay? Now, we look at all this back to setting a tone. The president sets a tone, and it's not a good tone. Would you agree with me right now that coming from the White House and branching out to all these other things is a time of fear, anger, and hatred?
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yes.
And we get that assessment because Trump has fear and anger and hatred and retribution. Now, he claims to be a man of the law. I would urge everybody to look at the people he's pardoning.
Great point.
And if you can go to bed tonight or tomorrow night or whenever you look it up and feel that he, based just on that he's a man of law and order, then I would submit that there's something wrong with you, and I'd love to sit down and talk to you about it.
It's hit. Well, first of all, you and I were already upset long ago when he pardoned, Roger Stone and Paul Manafort.
Right.
But every goddamn criminal, any person like himself gets pardoned, and I think that's part of that loyalty claim. That you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Look what I did, and that's what he does. It's obscene. Every Republican politician knows what's going on, but they overlook it. And like I say, the others don't care because they're. Look, it makes me sick even explaining it. It's it was bad enough when Roger Stone was pardoned, and the same with Manafort. So this is it's just going to get me angrier.
But you know what, Brian? I would make a little difference between the two. Yes, we should be angry, but they were political, right? I'm talking about the January 6th. They were insurrectionists.
Absolutely.
They were domestic terrorists. They injured police who are still paying a price psychologically.
Absolutely. The deaths they were responsible for 5 people's deaths, right?
Absolutely. And by direction, I literally mean that word, by direction, Trump is guilty because he told him basically, go up there.
And he knew, and they knew, just the fact they went up there, they knew they weren't going to face any type of competition.
Right. And of course, does he come up there? No. That would have been a question that I had. Okay, if I were them, I'm not. But if I were, wait a minute, I'm looking around. Donnie said he's going to be up here. Where the hell is he? I don't see him. Well, he's back in his, lair.
Well, he wanted to go up there. Of course, the Secret Service couldn't do it.
That's open to debate too. He claims, some people claim he wanted to be up there. Others are saying that.
Well, he did say something to the effect, it's not me they want to go after.
Well, and see what he does so well. And again, I've come around to believe that everything that is wrong with him as a human makes him the consummate con man. It really does, okay? And it proves that a con man just doesn't have to be smart necessarily to con. They just have to be a con man or a con person. And, he is doing this kind of thing where he always says, or most often says, no, I might be the target, but they're really after you. They're really after you. And he says that time and time and time again. Now, I know that you and I discussed this somewhat at length, but I still think we have to bring it back to some disappointments. And one of the disappointments that I have about the Biden years is specifically his appointing Merrick Garland as Attorney General and Merrick Garland's abject failure to do what I think was not only necessary but legal to do. I haven't, and you notice Garland hasn't said anything. He's just going to fade out, which is, I suppose.
And he won't say anything for the rest of his life. He just won't.
Because now, but then you have to blame a little bit on Barack Obama too.
Right.
Because remember, Obama was the one who said you'd be a good Supreme Court justice. I'm not sure that was
right. I'm not sure either.
And, it's kind of unfair, I guess, to Mr. Garland in a way, because I'm talking, but I mean, I'd offer him, please come over and we'll talk for an hour and you can you explain it. I'll stay as long as you want. Explain to me why you didn't do.
Does he remind you of
didn't do.
Judge Ito in the OJ trial? Where,
Well, I think there was a little difference in that. Yes. Okay. First of all, to answer your question.
I know, the fact that the
No.
weakness that came about.
Well, I think there is a difference. Okay. And I would actually say Garland was worse because of what he didn't do. Ito showed that the court was not above social media and grandstanding. That's really what Ito showed. Okay. He ran that court like I'm a star, right? Now, I have some familiarity, obviously, as a former reporter with judges and hearings, because basically I was on the track that went from, covering townships to covering police to covering courts to becoming a political reporter. That's one of the many ways you go. And when I was in court, it was clear that court, that judge, that was his kingdom. I mean, that he did. And later on, there were a couple of female judges just starting to come in when I left reporting, and it was their kingdom. I left one time. A judge cited me for contempt, and I had to go through the process because I was reading in his court. I guess it didn't help that I said, "Well, you really weren't doing much." I guess that didn't help either. But that idea, just to reinforce that, it is their court to do. So you have two types of judges, and I think we see that with your comparison of Garland and Ito. You have the kind that revels in the publicity, right, and the being out there. That was Ito. And then you have the person who wants to work in the shadows, and I don't mean that disparagingly. I just mean with no profile. I mean, Merrick Garland just reminds me of Harvey Milquetoast.
Right.
It's like just... he was there, and you had the weapons, and you didn't get around in time to use them.
All he did was try to look like he was being fair to both parties, and what happened to the law?
Well, and I think that could be a criticism of Biden too. I mentioned to Brian that I just started, and I'm going slow because I got a lot of the projects on the line. But I am reading the book that just came out about Biden and why he didn't resign. And just initially, I'm very concerned, but I want to finish the book and see, and then check. But right now, we're finding out, or I'm finding out, I think, that unless I find things in the book differently than I find them now, that there is no question that Joe Biden was two things. Could not have completed a second term as a fully competent president. And there seems to be much indication that he didn't even finish his final 2 years that way. Okay. So what does that mean? I don't know. Does it mean, I think obviously his failure to step aside and do kind of what he indicated he was going to do. Remember, I'm going to be a transitional president. Mm-hmm. Now he never, to my knowledge, and somebody could correct me on this if they know differently, but to my knowledge, he never said, I'm going to be a transitional president and not run. I don't know that I don't know if he said that. He did say, I won't pardon my son, and did do it. So, he wasn't always a man of his words. But so you've got how much do we blame Joe Biden for Donald Trump's victory? I think he has to bear some of that. I think he does. And his aides do. And Jill apparently played a very big role, his wife Jill, in defending her husband and pushing him.
Gary asked a good question. He says, why the fuck did he run then?
I can answer that, Gary, from the book and from what I know. Okay. In Washington, D.C., the aphrodisiac is not money, although it's wanted. It's not sex, although it's gotten. It is power. And there's no person on the planet, including the Pope, who has more power at that point than the President of the United States. He was referred to as the leader of the free world. And he was. Now, you have to look at a couple things that come out in the book and a couple things I know about Biden. Biden felt that he could overcome everything. It was different. They used to say about Obama that Obama just believed he was the smartest person in the room. And they said, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10 he was. But, that was kind of his thing. With Biden is, I can overcome anything. You go all the way back to his stuttering, all the way through. Remember, when he was grilled with plagiarism, charged with plagiarism, got by that, had 2 brain aneurysms, had his wife and child die, had another child in the car, brain damaged, lost his son, Beau, and actually, for a long time, lost his son, Hunter, to drug and alcohol addiction. And came through and survived all that at age and became president. And we have to give him credit. He is the person who stopped Trump. Hillary did not stop Trump. Okay. And she had plenty of time. So I think it was a combination of not wanting to give up the power, also thinking that I've survived so much, I can survive this. And also, let me do something extreme here. But it's really troubling me, so I'm going to vent a little bit on this. Not vent so much, but so Judy, my wife, we had to go to the hospital. She messed up her arm, and so we're in the emergency room for 5 hours, and there were 2 gentlemen in there, probably in their 90s, obviously in late stage dementia, and it really disturbed me. Okay, it really did, to think that that's how people can end up. Well, I would bet that neither one of them knew where they were or what they were doing. So a lot of times with what should I say, with Biden, was he aware of how slippage was coming? Because remember, he was never a good speaker.
Right.
He was always, and the thing was, gaffe-making Joe. Remember, Obama even made jokes about it. Because Joe was always, and he's always saying things. I mean, so it's that his aides, were protecting him. And basically what it came down to, and this is to you, Gar, and to everybody else, at least in the beginning stages of the book, Joe said, I'm going to run, and that was it. So the idea of the buck stops here, it did stop with him. Now, there are some frightening incidents. We see more now. Not everybody, but people were upset when George Clooney came out against him, right? Remember? And wrote a letter, he needs to step down before he did. Well, there's a reason for that. Clooney is one of the biggest fundraisers, or a big fundraiser, right, of Democrats. I don't know if you call him a personal friend of Joe Biden, but they've been each other's friends all the time. And Biden looked him right in the face and said, "Who are you?" So, that kind of explains Clooney's action. And he didn't come out and say, necessarily just said he's not capable of running. Well, no matter what, I mentioned last week, and I'll just do it again just quickly. I think Jake Tapper has actually done a service writing that book. I understand Trump's the enemy now. I understand it's past history. But I think it's enlightening to know the lengths to which family and aides and fundraisers will go to keep and the president in. And that's nothing new. What is, though, back to Mr. Trump for a moment, I want to ask you a question, Brian. Do you think, we'll start with this. Do you think we're no longer the leader of the free world? What's your take on that?
I think at this point, there is no leader of the free world. There's not. I mean, you could argue that maybe Germany or France, but there has to be some kind of strength behind that, and they don't really have the military to do it. So we're in a very uncomfortable position in which there is no. We are not. In fact, I think there's a certain resentment and anger at this country because the populace has voted for such such an abominable man. I mean, he's not even a man. He's just he's a child. And I just think there is no leader in the free world. I mean, if anything, China is the closest thing resembling it, because even though they're not, I wouldn't consider them a decent government, at least if I had to choose between the Chinese governing me and Trump, I would choose the Chinese because at least there'd be some sense of decency behind it, and some sense of logic. And if I had to choose, it would be pretty easy. So I would guess China. I know you're not asking me which country would be the leader of the free
but
world.
that's a good.
But I think China is the de facto leader of the free world. Right now.
And I like your term de facto. I mean, right now, they're making investments in Africa. I mean, years ago when I was in Cuba,
They're supplying the world, so they're doing that.
And that's it.
And who knows, Dave? We know with their technology, I mean, they're going to get better and better, and they're going to surpass us, and then it's going to be too late.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we've only got a few minutes, but we'll go more into depth this. But you know what I'm really worried about too is what I guess I'm going to call, not original with me, call the brain drain. And what do I mean by that is, with Trump's attacks and RFK's attacks, a lot of people, one of them being Timothy Snyder, who right now is probably one of the leading experts on tyranny and freedom, is leaving America to go teach at McGill University in Canada, along with two very highly qualified professors. People are saying and looking, I can't do it here. I'm not. Just this week, or 2 days ago, Trump fires the director of the National Portrait Gallery for being DEI complicit. He's certainly looking at the Smithsonian and changing history. Has a personal battle with Harvard, for whatever reason. Apparently, it's not, as some say. So I point this out for anybody. It's not as has been memed and talked about. It's not because Barron didn't get into Harvard. I don't think that's it. That may be that Trump didn't get into Harvard. That's still a question of debate.
But he certainly has a reason, whatever it is, we don't know. But there's some vindictiveness
Correct,
involved.
because everything he operates with is vindictiveness, and maybe it's just Harvard thinks they're all that, and I'm going to bring them down. And some of the ideas that come up with that are not that bad, not from him, but others. Yeah, you know what? We should spend more money on vocational education, and I've long said that. We need plumbers and we need carpenters. I mean, ask anybody, Brian, around. It's hard to get somebody. Their dance card is filled, right? We need more of that. But we also need scientists. And think about this. If all the students, just say for a moment, if Trump gets his way and all of, I think it's 31% of Harvard undergrads. I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it's undergrads or undergrads and grads. It might have to be both, I think. But anyway, 31% are foreign born. Well, they're going to, you know who's sending them letters right now? The universities in China. Come with us, free education. We'll give you whatever you need, whatever you want. You're a 23-year-old. You're looking at a terrible job market. You're looking at a horrible president. You're looking about, he's not even going to let me stay in the country.
And they'll go because there's a sense of excitement. You're going to a foreign nation.
Why wouldn't you? Again, just getting back to Eastern Europe for a moment, talking to a young lady from the Ukraine. And this is the way you run a country. All of the NATO countries, and even some who are just NATO supporters, have made an offer to any student in the Ukraine can come and to their university for free to get them out of the war-torn country, right? That's what you do. You don't do what Trump does and throw people, and I know for a fact, living here in this apartment complex, we have the largest number of people in our complex are graduate students, and the majority of them are from a country other than the U.S., right? Now, I've actually had occasion to talk to some of them who are, I'd ask them, I'd say, look, are you going to stay? Are you going to go? I don't know. And some of them end up staying. Some of them say they're going to go back. So in other words, we're going to lose all over the place. And unfortunately, MAGA supporters say good riddance. We don't need the yellow people. We don't need the red people. We don't need the dot heads. Well, we do. Just like we need immigrants, and we've needed them forever. Are you going to quit your job tomorrow, Brian, and go out and pick produce for even if it was $10 an hour?
Not a chance.
Exactly. Who is? Who's going to do that? And we talk about manufacturing. Guys, anybody out there, I'm 100% certain of this. Manufacturing is not coming back to the United States the way it was.
It never
Two
could.
reasons.
Not with robotics and things like that. Anyway,
That's exactly. There are two things going on. Number one, it's cheaper to make and ship than it is to make here. That's a given for most products. Secondly, what you just said, Brian, robotics, IA, which is not, I said that IA just to mess with it, because the Secretary of Education said A1. Did you see that? She
Yes,
said the problem,
yes.
She said, this is a person who is supposed to be the number one expert in education. Says, we got to stop this A1 sauce.
Right.
She didn't say sauce, A1. She didn't say sauce.
right.
And she was a good wrestling promoter. So I guess we'll wrap it up this way. Kind of bit of a downer show, but we're kind of in a downer time. Each week I kind of ask and we talk about it. Are you more optimistic, less optimistic, or about where you were this time 1 week ago?
Oh, I'm definitely more pessimistic.
Okay.
I don't see any united front against him right now either. So.
And I'm going to go, not to play either side, I'm going to say, with this reservation, I'm going to say on June 14th, we know that Donald Trump thinks he's having a birthday celebration. We know that there is going to be this massive fascist, authoritarian military parade that shouldn't happen in D.C., especially when there's no cause. But also, I was looking at the numbers today. Maybe 14 is the lucky number. Right now, there are currently more than 1,400 anti-Trump events scheduled that day worldwide. So I can't jump to the answer yet, but I see the resistance growing. Another example, in your community, which used to be my community, do you realize there's an anti-Trump organization growing there?
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, and
right in this house.
Well, we know that, but I'm talking about but I'm saying we're beginning to organize, and as the first step is to get out there, right? And we're seeing that. So, it's a long time. It's not tomorrow. I've said before, and I say again, unfortunately, we are up against a deadline. We were not in Vietnam. I mean, we were because kids were getting killed every day. I don't mean that, but there was not but we have to do something to get rid of Trump in the time we have left,
right,
if we can. But still, yeah, I would say I'm more optimistic at this point, pending what happens. On the 14th, I'll have a better handle on it. But right now,
I like your optimism, Dave. I do.
Well, it's not foolish optimism.
And I'm not saying that in any sarcastic way. I do like your optimism, and I hope you're right.
Remember, I'm only cautious. I'm only saying the resistance is growing. I'm not saying the resistance is going to succeed.
Successful,
there's a big difference between that. Anyway, again, everybody who listened, whether it's live. Or the hundreds of, what was it The Rock used to say, or the millions and millions of The Rock's fans who watch on YouTube.
Rock.
Well, we'll talk about that. He's seriously being considered by some as a presidential candidate, but that's for another day.
Well, you don't put it beyond anybody because he probably could make it the way things are going with Trump. So I don't know.
Yeah, there you are.
So listen, Dave, thank you very much, and thank you everybody for showing up. And we'll be here next week as long as Trump doesn't get us in a mess of whatever sort it is. So thank you very much, Dave. And we'll see
as
you,
always, it's a pleasure and honor. And I do want to point out to everyone, Brian and I disagree on some things, but we agree on more. But this really is Brian's show. It was his baby. He kindly asked me to come on. So I just want everyone to know, if you like the show, I'll take all the credit. But if you don't like the show, Brian started it. If you have a problem with the show, Brian's who you want to contact. If you don't like the technology, Brian is 100% for that. But again, Brian, it is your show. So
well, just ask everybody, please look for Dave and myself on Substack. It's a little
Yeah, that's
different
something.
tune there, and you know,
Would you remind me, and we'll talk about that next, because I think Substack is a place where we really, not
Yeah, I
us,
can-
but where people need to go. And
Right.
we'll make that one of the topics next week.
Right.
Okay? That sounds
Right.
good, Brian.
all right. See you, everybody, and please remember Substack.